Okay, g'day folks, welcome back. So today we're going to have a chat about working with a man box. Now it's a topic that's not covered a great deal in the high risk licensing, but it is a pretty high risk activity and it's pretty important to understand some of the rules involved if you are going to be working with a man box. Now there is a fair bit involved with working with them, but what we'll do is we'll break it down into three key areas. So we'll look at the actual inspection of the man box and what's required of the man box itself. We'll have a look at some of the requirements of the crane that's going to be used to lift it, and we'll also look at some of the things that we need to make sure of while we're actually using that man box. Alright, so to start with, what we'll do is we'll look at the man box requirements themselves. So, like any other piece of lifting equipment, you must thoroughly inspect it before you use it. Now, while you're inspecting it, some of the things you need to keep an eye out for, particular to a man box, is the lifting equipment attached to it must be dedicated to it. Now that lift equipment must be either chains or flexible steel wire rope, and it must be securely attached to it. Whether that be if you've got shackles that are moused, or it may be hammer locks, some form of secure fitting that it cannot become undone. Also, while you're inspecting it, must have details either stamped on it or on a data plate marked on it. And as a minimum, the requirements are it must have a working load limit marked, must also have the tear mass showing, and also a ID reference or serial number, something you can match it back to the lifting register. The sides of it can be no less than 1 metre high, and if it has a door, not all of them do, some of them do just climb into, but if it does have a door, the door must be inward opening, it must be self-closing and latching. The only exception to that rule would be if you've got a rescue box or a first aid box, in which case the door must open outwards, and that's to allow for a stretch to be carried into that man box. Either way, the door must still be self-closing and latching, just to avoid it accidentally becoming open. Alright, so they're just some of the key points you need to look for while you're inspecting the man box. Give it a good thorough going over. Remember, your people are being lifted in that man box, and it's pretty critical to make sure that everything is in good condition before you use it. Alright, now going on to some of the requirements for the crane itself. So when we look at the crane itself, the crane has to have a capacity of at least twice the total load of the box at the maximum radius that it's going to be working at, and it can't be less than 1,000 kilos. Alright, the crane must also be fitted with an anti-two block, and all levers and all pedals, depending on what you're operating, they must return to neutral if you let go of them. Saves any accidental things happening. Now, if your crane is an older crane, it may be fitted with a free fall device. If it has got a free fall, that must be positively locked out as well, so there's no way you could accidentally knock that free fall. Now, the crane should be tested. Now, when you test it, you can lift and hold a load that's going to be either equivalent to the winch line pull or not less than twice the maximum lifted load. Alright, so they're just some of the basic requirements for the crane in itself. So the crane must meet all those requirements before you use a man box. Alright, now, things we've got to look at while we're actually using it. Now, these can include things like, obviously, when we're inside the man box, we've got to have a fall arrest harness worn at all times. Now, the harness should be fitted to a dedicated anchor point in the workbox or to the main sling ring above the heads of the workers. Now, wind is a critical factor. Now, they should not be used in winds that are above 7 meters a second, which is equivalent to about 25 kilometers an hour. It doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're up there in a man box, especially if you're going to put them down in a small area, that wind can sort of play havoc with you as well. Now, you must remain inside the workbox as much as possible, so you're not going to be leaning out fully over the handrail trying to do work. Right? Try and keep as much of your body inside that workbox as you can. Now, the crane itself, one thing the crane should not do, or shall not do I should say, it's definitely no-no, should never travel while you have people in the man box. So if you're in a roughie, you're not going to travel while you've got people in the man box. If you're in a frenner, okay, well the only frenner you can realistically put a man box on would be a 25 tonner, which has a 2 block, or none of the others have a 2 block. All the others you will be using a sully box. But even if you're using a sully box, when you have people in that box, do not travel with that crane. Alright, get yourself in the right position first, then the people can climb in the man box and then you can lift them up. Now, whenever you're using a man box, you must have some sort of emergency system in place, okay, in case there's a crane failure or if something goes wrong. You need to have some systems in place to retrieve the people out of that man box. Now, another key point that you've got to remember, if you are using a man box, if you look at the regulations, the man box should only be used if there is no other reasonable form of access. So if you can easily reach that job in a boom lift, or you can build a scaffold up to that height, the man box should be the last resort. Should always go for the boom lift or the scaffold. Okay, so they're just a few of the key points you need to keep in mind if you are going to be using a man box. Alright, now not a lot of it's covered in the high risk, but it's always a good idea to know. Now the other key point you've got to remember is when you are dogging for a man box, now ideally you're going to be inside the man box 95% of the time. Now, while that is the ideal situation, it's not always possible. It's more than likely going to be a two-person man box. They may require the two tradesmen up there doing the job. That's completely fine. You can still use the man box and the dogman can direct the man box from the ground, so long as he can visually see that man box throughout the whole range of movement of the crane. Now, you don't have to worry about being in line of sight of the crane, but if you're the dogman for that man box, make sure you can see and have your eyes on that man box at all the time. So keep in mind, the one thing that is required in one of the questions in the high risk licensing is where must the dogman be when using a man box? And quite simply, he's got to be either in the man box or in full view of the man box at all times. Alright, so there's just a quick few pointers for you. Alright, if you need to know anything else, just leave a comment in the comment section and I'll try and get back to you. Okay, thanks for your time.